Hello listeners, we are your co-hosts Janine Bailey and Marie Quigley for the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. Empower World brings guests who are making a difference to the world to inspire coaches and leaders who lead with mind, heart and soul. Hello and welcome to the next podcast. My name's Marie Quigley and this morning I'm speaking with the wonderful Barry Phillips. Barry is owner of Knowledge King, a personal development company supporting the direct sales and coaching industry for the past 35 years. And more recently, Barry has moved into deep listening workshops, which I attended one of them around 6 months ago. I got some information from a friend that Barry was coming up this way, and I thought I'd take advantage of attending one of Barry's workshops. And I can just say the deep connection that happened in that workshop, not just with people who are coaches, but people who were really interested in deepening their listening skills. It was absolutely beautiful. So I thought Barry and I should have a conversation because I know listeners, you're always looking at ways to deepen your skills and support others. So Barry, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Marie. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Great to have you here. So I've done a short introduction, Barry, but expand on who you are and perhaps why we're having this conversation today.
Okay, great question, Marie. Thank you. So as you mentioned before, for 35 years, I've run a personal development company which has supported the direct sales and the coaching and leadership industry, mainly with good books. So kind of like a mobile bookshop, but we've also over the years hosted a lot of great speakers and we've hosted workshops where we brought speakers over from other countries, which has had a great impact on people. And I guess my passion is personal development, mainly through books and CDs. CDs not so relevant now, obviously. That was showing my age a bit, but ultimately, I've just loved that world and it's a world that I think is sometimes not as well known as it could be. Just the resources and the material that's out there, and because of that, what kind of happened and how this came about, how we came to meet was so when COVID first hit, just like everybody else, I was in lockdown. I had to move my business from a warehouse with offices to my home. Ultimately into my garage and part of my house, which was an interesting scenario. But what was more interesting was that I got a lot of leaders and colleagues, friends, customers that called me during that first lockdown period that were really in a state of shock, fear. Nobody knew what was going to happen, me included. And traditionally, what would have happened when friends and colleagues and customers called me asking for help, I would be able to direct them to a book. So I think this is going to help you. But obviously there was no book. Nobody knew. And not only did I not know, but I was just like them. I also had fear, around what was going to happen and what was going on and just like everyone else. But what was really interesting was everybody that called me, and most of the people that called me were leaders. They were leaders with teams and groups of their own. Everybody thanked me at the end of the call. And it was really interesting because I don't know if they actually said, thank you for listening, but that's what they were implying. And I really started then to kind of understand the importance of just listening, because ultimately that's all I could do. I had no solutions. I had no answers. I couldn't fix the situation, but I could listen, and that's all I could do. And that's what I did. And it really got me interested. And I took a real deep dive myself into what was out there in terms of really listening to people. And I'd done stuff like how to win friends and influence people, skill with people. I'd done lots of books and courses around active listening, but that wasn't it. That wasn't what this was. This was something very different. So at the beginning, again, bear in mind, this was the beginning of COVID. I did ask myself the question, how can I help this situation? What can I do? What can Barry do? And the two things that came to me after, it was about a month, I think. The first thing was to become a Samaritan listener, which I did. And I've now been a Samaritan listener for 3.5 years. I'm also now a Samaritan mentor, so I train the new Samaritans in how to listen. And that
Barry, can I just stop you there? Because some of us
sure.
may not know about what Samaritans means.
Yes, great question, Marie. Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, so Samaritans is a UK and Irish charity based in the UK and Ireland. Sorry, that it's a suicide hotline, but it's more than that. In that, probably only 20% of the people that call the Samaritans, it's a free service. They can call at any time, 24/7. And what the Samaritans will do is what we do and what we're trained to do is we're trained to listen and support somebody. And we have parameters that we work within. So where I said probably 80% of the calls are not suicidal calls, 20% are. The other 80% are people that are just lonely, people that have mental health issues, people are just looking for direction. They just need to be heard ultimately. So it's a fantastic charity, which is very well known in the UK and Ireland and supports thousands of people. So the parameters that we work within are what really formed the deep listening knowledge that I have, but also the workshop that we do. So the parameters that a Samaritan works within, a Samaritan just takes calls. So it's just done on a 24/7 live call. And when you speak with somebody, you're not allowed to give out any information about you, about yourself. It's purely about the speaker, the person calling. You are allowed to give your name. That's the only thing you're allowed to give. And some people don't use their real name. I do go under my name, Barry. So that's a great parameter because at no point is this anything to do with me or about me. So I don't share anything about myself personally. And because it's totally anonymous, we listen from a point of no judgment. We have no opinion. More importantly, we're not allowed to give advice. And that is so empowering, I find, because I don't know how to fix them. I don't know what the solution is to their challenges. But what I do when I just listen to them and support them, hold that space for them, is I give them a chance to see something fresh and new for themselves. And quite often during the course of a Samaritan call, which can be anything from 5 minutes to a couple of hours sometimes, the average is probably 45 minutes to an hour. But what tends to happen is people, just because they're in that quiet space, they calm down themselves. And I liken it, Marie, to a snow globe. Most people are familiar with a snow globe. And what happens when you shake a snow globe up, everything, all the snow covers whatever's in the middle. I have this beautiful snow globe with a kangaroo in the middle that I got from Australia. When you shake it up, you can't see the kangaroo in the middle. But as the snow settles, you can see clearly the kangaroo. And that's what tends to happen. So when people call the Samaritans, their head is all over the place. Their thoughts are all over the place. They're kind of in a thought storm normally. They might be in an anxiety attack. And that's where all their thoughts are everywhere and they can't see clearly. But as somebody holds a space and listens to them deeply, with no judgment, with not trying to fix them, not giving them any advice, they settle. And as just like as the snow settles and you can see clearly into the snow globe, they settle and they can start to see clearer and clearly around whatever their possible challenge is. They settle, all the thoughts start to settle and they really calm down. And sometimes to the extent where they actually can see a solution for themselves, which is beautiful. It's just a beautiful space to hold for somebody. And that's really where my grounding for deep listening came from and still comes from. Whenever I listen from that space, no judgment, no opinion, not trying to fix or help, come up with any sort of solution, just there to hold a space and listen to that person, wherever that wants to go. And that's the other beautiful thing, Marie, is that when we say nothing, people just get that space to just explore what they want to talk about. And sometimes, like with a Samaritan call, it might be a call will start something like, I'm really disgruntled with my partner, my spouse, my children. And 45 minutes later, you're talking about something a lot deeper, something that might have happened and affected their whole life from their childhood, for instance. And that's because they've been given that space, that permission just to go as deep as they want and explore it. So there's a real power in the silence of a Samaritan call and just being silent and giving somebody that space just to explore what they want to explore. So I know there's other suicide hotlines around the world, and most of them work under the same kind of premise that the Samaritans do in the UK. So I hope that kind of explains where and what the Samaritans do. And it can be tough at times, but it's a real privilege just to hold that space for somebody. And as I mentioned earlier, I can't tell you the amount of times where I've literally said nothing on a call other than maybe an hello, how can the Samaritans help you today? My name's Barry. I'm here to listen and support you. And then an hour later or 45 minutes later, they're thanking me and they can see something. They've had a fresh idea, a fresh new thought around a particular situation, and they feel totally at ease and in a much, much better place. And for me, that's a gift. It's a gift to be able to hold a listening space for people.
Thank you so much for sharing and also explaining the role of the amazing role Samaritans and any other charity that supports this kind of work, Barry. It's badly needed in the world. So many of us don't have that space that we can be listened to. And I noticed when you were talking how I felt my heart opening up as you were explaining it. And I noticed I was really paying attention, not just to what you're saying, but to what was happening in my body as the conversation was expanding. And right at the beginning, you said something about, we all hear about active listening, but it's so much more than this. And I recall as well, it's the same thing in the workshop when we connected. It is not just about the words that we say to somebody else or the space. It's almost like there's a heart-to-heart connecting when we can provide a space for silence and a place for somebody to just process things. And I'm not sure if it's scientific, but I did hear somebody talking about the fact that when we connect deeply with somebody, it's our emotional brain or the right brain that connects with the right brain of somebody else, almost like the mother and child connection. And it allows for so much safety and trust and rapport to happen that then we start to talk about what really matters. So it's not really our disgruntled relationship that's frustrating us. There's something so deep underneath, and having the ability to say it out loud can be transformational. Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing that. That's so profound. I'm interested, Barry, because for me, meeting you, you're a very practical man, CEO of an organization, you've run your own business. How did you transition? Because a lot of people come to coaching, therapy, other forms of supporting others, trying to solve the problem for them. So they come from a solution-based, especially, I'm going to generalize here, so listeners don't hit me, but from a male perspective, a lot of men want to solve the problem. How did you shift from trying to solve and fix it for somebody else to listening? What happened within you?
That's a great question, Marie. So I'm probably going to tell you a personal story. So I'm a father to three adult children now. They're still my kids, but they're all adults, grown adults, living their own lives and all doing very well. I'm very proud of all three of them. But every now and again, they have stuff going on, just like everybody does. And I've spent my whole life thinking that my role as a father was to help them, was to support them, was to fix them whenever they got into a jam, whenever they came to me, with a challenge. But what I realized was that I was always thinking that was my role. So it didn't matter what they shared with me, that's where I would come from. That would be my go-to. That would be my story. So as they started to share what's going on for them, I would just go straight in with a solution, whatever came to mind, or any way that I felt I could help, or giving them advice. And what I realized when I became a much better listener myself was that they weren't asking for advice. They just wanted to be heard. And to clarify that, now the only time I ever go in and help or try and give advice is when I'm actually asked, Dad, what do you think of this? What would you do? How can I do that? Can you help me, Dad? That's the trigger now. And when I hear that, that's when that's when I can come in and do that dad thing, that fixing, that man thing, as you say. But I was doing it all the time, Marie, all the time, every time. And I've got a great story there that's happened more recently. So my youngest son, he travels a lot for his business and his work, and so normally around 5 weeks at a time he'll be abroad, and he'll come back, and so I love the time that we get to spend together. He'll have a couple of weeks in the UK, and then he'll be off again. And what had happened was he'd been away for 5 weeks, and in that period, he'd split with his partner, and they 6 months previously they bought their first property, which in the UK, as everyone can appreciate, was a lot of money. It was a big commitment. And I heard secondhand that they kind of split. And I hadn't heard from him directly because, as I said, he was on the road, he was traveling. And I knew he didn't just want to tell me outright. He wanted to speak to me about it personally. So when he came home, we were very fortunate in that we had an opportunity to go and watch a football game in the UK, professional game. And it was the team we supported. So he said, yeah, Dad, would you like to come Monday night? Be great. I'll drive into London for the game. And I thought, perfect. That'll be a great opportunity for me to just sit with him, catch up with him, find out what's going on. So that's what we did. He came and picked me up. We had an hour and a half into London, the journey. And in that time, I just made my mind that I was just going to just listen to what he had to share. So he did. He shared. He told me everything that had happened. And right at the very end of it, I can remember, I can picture where we were. We were just coming into London. And he turned around to me and he said, go on then, Dad. Everyone else has got an opinion. What's yours? What do you think I should do? And I turned around to him and I said, you know what, Lyle? You'll work it out. And our relationship changed that night. Yeah, it really did. And I'm getting goosebumps sharing this because it's such a different relationship now. Because what I now know I did that evening was I empowered him. And that's what we have the opportunity to do as coaches and leaders. When we listen to somebody and we help them to see that they can work this out themselves, that's empowerment. And I love that. For me, there's nothing better than seeing that light bulb moment when somebody sees something different or something new, and they can not just with a Samaritan, I'm talking about in life in general. It's beautiful. And for me, I just love that. And as I said, to me, that's what this is about. That's giving someone the opportunity to hold in a space for somebody and letting them know that they've got this, whatever it is, they'll be able to work this out because they have. Everyone has this. We all have this within us. And I love what you touched on earlier, Maria, about connection, because that's what this is. It's a much deeper connection. And when we listen from that standpoint and we both settle, because both people settle, that's what you get. You get this connection, you get this empathy, this compassion, and it's almost like you're one.
Yeah.
That's the way I describe it. You become one, and within that, they see new ideas, they have insights, they get in touch with their wisdom, and also so do we. We have that opportunity to do that for ourselves. So it's a beautiful space for both the listener and the conversationalist, So yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Oh, yes, that makes so much sense. I have had a similar experience when I really learned about what deep listening was myself, because I think if we can bring it to our families first, the people we love most, if we can bring it there first, it can create massive transformation, massive love. If we're listening from a place of love rather than a place of judgment or solution, then it feels different. And that person notices that. I know I've been at parties in the past before, and people have said, "Oh, what do you?" I haven't shared what I do for a living, but they've said, "What do you do for a living?" Because you listen in a way that a lot of people don't, and I feel like I've been seen. And I think it is the greatest gift to give somebody, is this, to see them. And then we see ourselves in them as well, which is, as you said, this reciprocal thing that happens when we deeply listen. Okay, so we know that we have level 1 listening, where we're not really listening at all. Level 2 listening, where we might be paying attention to what the other person is saying, but we're listening to respond. Level 3 listening might mean that we're listening to the words, and we're kind of focusing on the words and remembering the information. And then that deeper listening that we're talking about, Barry, of maybe listening to the essence of somebody, maybe allowing a space that's sacred for whatever to emerge. So how do we move? How did you learn to move from solution or not, maybe even not listening at all, to this sacred space?
Again, great question, Marie. It's a practice. It really is a practice. That's what comes to me. We have to practice, but anyone can do it, which is great. And what I like about it, it's just a choice. It really is just a choice. I choose to deep listen. And I just show up with an open, curious mind, or curious state of mind. And then I'm aware of how I'm listening. So what I mean by that is, and I suppose if I backtrack, whenever we're thinking in a conversation, or when we're meant to be listening, we're not listening. So if you're thinking, you're not listening. That's one of the keys. So the minute you notice yourself with going off, having thoughts, because we all do that, by the way, and even, with the training I've had and the practice I've had, I still do that. I notice my mind going off. I maybe have a question come to mind when somebody's talking, or I do start making a judgment. But the minute I notice that, I stop myself and I bring myself back to the present moment and I listen. Because that's the other beautiful benefit of really deep listening, is that it brings you and the speaker into the present moment. And that, again, is what we were alluding to earlier, where we were talking about connection. That's a big part of why we're so connected, is because we're both totally present in the moment. So it's okay to have the thoughts and to, but just notice them and bring yourself back to the present moment, and just be aware that you're back in the present moment listening again. Mm-hmm. So it does take practice. It really does. But you get better and better, just like with anything. And you'll notice it. And I love what you mentioned earlier, Marie, because you reminded me, people notice. We know when we're being listened to, and we know when we're not being listened to. So just that awareness. Once you're aware of this, once you've heard this podcast, you will be more aware. And what I love about what happens here is that once you've got that awareness, you can't go back. In a positive way, this is, because you're always then aware, oh, hold on a minute, I wasn't listening then. You bring yourself back, you're back listening, you're back in the present moment. So ultimately, there's just 2 steps to deep listening. The first is to see it as a good idea, and then to be open-minded and curious, and come to any conversation with that childlike curiosity. And that'll put you in good stead with anything in life, especially as a coach or as a leader. And the second is just to notice you're listening. So either notice whether you're totally present and you're listening, and if you're not, bring yourself back and start listening again. Does that answer the question, Marie?
It does, because I love how you've described that practice, that, it is a practice. And I agree, it's a continual practice. We are human beings, so we have all these thoughts and judgments. We're judges to, keep us safe in the world. We judge what works and what doesn't, but judgment is a part of our system. And I love how you described it as come back to the present moment, because that's all we have. All we have is now. We don't have the past, it's gone. We don't have the future, it's not here yet. We only have the present. And therefore, if we are somewhere else in our heads, we cannot be listening. And, I describe, when I'm training coaches, I describe it as just stay with what is now. Don't start working out solutions or trying to get anybody anywhere. Just stay with what is now and see what evolves. And, Nancy Klein in her book, I think it's I Promise Not to Interrupt, is showing us the way to allow somebody to just explore their own thinking, their own feeling, their own sensations. And even if they don't know where they're going with it, the fact that they're processing something and they're being allowed to, in the presence of another human being, can create what you said at the beginning, their own solutions, their own way forward, or a calmness, so that they, as you described that beautiful metaphor of the snow globe, so things settle so that they can see clearly.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So the work with the Samaritans has obviously profoundly impacted how you have conversations. And I mean, thank you for doing that work. There's so many amazing people who go and listen every single day and every single night, all hours of the day. So let's give a huge shout out to anyone who's doing that type of work. How did you move then, Barry, to supporting this work and spreading the word about deep listening in the way that you're doing with your workshops?
Okay, so I'm very fortunate in that I've got, bear in mind I've been in business for 35 years, I've got a big customer base and friendship base of people that know, like, and trust me. So when I came across this, the way I really learned it, Marie, is as I went to, I did quite a few deep listening workshops on Zoom, mainly with Americans. This is quite prevalent in America. I say quite prevalent. It's not that prevalent, but deep listening workshops are a thing over there. They do teach them corporately. People coach from that standpoint. People lead from that standpoint. And so that's where I went alongside the Samaritans. That's the other training that I did and got. And there's actually some good material on YouTube. In fact, free material around deep listening. There's a lady called Mavis Karn, which is Karn. She was one of my mentors, and she's got quite a lot of material on YouTube, which is free, where you can actually watch a deep listening workshop and listen to a deep listening workshop. Which is very powerful, and she does explain a lot of what we've been talking to as well in her way. So that was my journey. That's what I did, and I always remember when I first started my Samaritans training. It's a great training, and you have 8 weeks of training in classroom, and then you go into the ops room, and you have another 8 weeks of listening in and being trained that way. And I remember the very, very first training, and the trainer asking everybody, the trainees, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the top, the best, where would you put yourself? Where would you rate yourself as a listener? And because I'd done a lot of personal development, I honestly thought at that moment I was probably a 7 or an 8. What I realized during the course of that first couple of weeks, to be honest with you, not even 8 weeks, I was probably more like a 3 or a 4, because I wasn't really listening. I thought I was paying attention. I might have been able to say what you said to me back, but 9 times out of 10, I was thinking whilst you were talking. I might have been working out what I was going to say. I might have been disagreeing or agreeing with what you were going to say. And any of those things are thought. Whenever we're thinking, we're not listening. it kept bringing me back to, I'm not listening, start again, back to the present moment. So again, that's kind of the training that I did, and I'm remembering that training now. And even now, as I said, I still find myself slipping in and out of deep listening when I'm there. But all I have to do is bring myself back to the present moment, and that's something we could all do, and we all benefit from as well. As you say, because it's all we've ever really got anyway. It is all we've got.
It is indeed. So you learned these skills, practice these skills. You recognized that it was a practice, and there was a way that you could connect to somebody that allowed them to do this thinking. And let's say we can't always be in deep listening. For example, in this conversation here, I'm thinking of questions to ask you as we're talking, Barry. So I'm moving in and out of deep listening with you, paying attention to yourself. And when we're in times of crisis, suddenly we need to kind of lead the team and tell them what to do, because actually we need to, if the office is burning, we need to tell everybody to get out of the office. So there are levels, and I think we need to be aware of when that deep listening is going to be the most useful and when it's not. So, and then you developed the programs, the workshops that you did, Barry. What's the message from these workshops, and how do you put them together?
So ultimately, what happened with me, as I said, I'm blessed in that I had a lot of people that know, like, and trust me. So I just went to several, and it was only a couple of the leaders in the beginning. And I just said, listen, I'm putting on a listening workshop. I really feel your teams will benefit from this. And they saw that straight away. And they trusted me to come along and do it. And I always remember the second one I ever did was a very small group. I think it was 20 people. But within that 20 people, there were two coaches that were not part of that organization. So there was 18 people that were part of an organization, and there were two guest coaches. And one of those coaches then he's told everyone about what I do. And that's how we came to meet Marie. And that's how I came to work with several other coaching organizations, because people just saw the benefit of this, and it's just like, wow, this is so powerful. Everybody needs to see this. Everybody can be a better listener. Everybody's business, everybody's personal life will be enhanced by just becoming a better listener, by just learning how to and practicing how to become a better listener. So that's kind of where it's gone. And I'll be honest, it's really very much word of mouth that's taken me on the journey that I've been on with the workshops. And it's a journey I'm absolutely loving. To me, it's a privilege, just to be surrounded by people that are seeing the empowerment that can take place just through listening to somebody, through really, really listening to somebody. It's just, it's beautiful. It really is just a beautiful scenario. Everybody drops into it. Everybody settles. And it's so powerful, because people just see things. What I liken it to, and this is again something that, is relevant. So we've all had these times where we've found solutions to things when we've got quiet. It might be, with me, it's walking down the river. I'm very fortunate. I live near the River Thames. Most mornings I walk down there for about an hour. And very often I'll just be walking totally in the present moment, and all of a sudden I'll have a new thought around a challenge maybe that I've got, or a different way of doing something, or I might be in the shower. I used to get it when I used to cycle a lot. I used to be out on the bike in nature again, and all of a sudden I just, eureka moment. Or I might be driving on a motorway, totally elsewhere in my thoughts, and then all of a sudden a solution comes. Everybody's got a story around that. Everybody knows what that means. We've all had insight, wisdom come to us. There's lots of different getting in touch with our intuition. There's lots of different ways of describing that, but that's what happens when you get in a deep listening space. not just for the person who's being listened to, but for the speaker as well. Everybody, you're both in that I don't know what you'd call it, but in that space, that's it. It's a space that's created, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, I heard, I can't remember the name of this researcher that was sharing when we learn something new or when we want to have a kind of new awareness about something, it tends not to happen when we're busy thinking about things. It tends to happen when we're in a reflective state, or maybe when we're not even thinking about it, as you mentioned, being out in nature, or when we sleep and we're in a rested state. We wake up the next morning and suddenly the answer appears. And it's like surrendering. Instead of struggling with the answer, it's like surrendering so that the wisdom can be allowed to be unfolded within us. And I thought that was such a beautiful way of describing that. To learn and be aware of something, it needs time to rise up so that we can pay attention to it. And if constantly busy, whether it's solving other people's solutions or doing something else, maybe moving towards the future or ruminating about the past, we actually can't allow that time to evolve.
Beautiful.
So, Barry, in your workshops, I think anybody who's interested in connecting to other human beings can gain from your workshop, because it doesn't matter how much experience you have, there's always something new to learn. So what's the key messages from your workshops that people would be interested to find out?
I think the ultimate message, Marie, is if you really want to connect with anybody in your world on a much deeper level, then please look into deep listening, because that's what it facilitates. It facilitates a much greater connection with anybody. But I mean, most of the people that we work with are leaders, are coaches. And I mean, it's so important in that environment. And most coaches are good listeners. But they are quite often, listening to fix, listening to come up with solutions. And I guess one of the real aha moments that people get from the workshops is that sometimes all we need to do is listen.
Absolutely. I tell this story to coaches to help them in their practice of listening. That a man gets in his car after work every day and drives home to his family. And on the way, he parks up by the side of the road and he gets out and he talks to the lamppost. And he spends about 20 minutes talking to the lamppost. And he says, "Thank you, lamppost. I don't know what I'd do without you." And he gets back in his car and he goes home and he has a wonderful time with his family. And the lamppost is not interfering, of course. The lamppost is just listening. And I think that metaphor really helps us realize if we can be the lamppost, that can help somebody. Of course, we've got all our bodily responses that can show that we're listening. That connection absolutely helps. But I think that's a lovely metaphor to help us shut up and listen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful. And I think, again, all we have to do really is reflect from our own experience, Marie. We've all had that experience of not being listened to. So you're sharing something, you're telling something that's really important to you. The other person isn't listening. We all know what that feels like. It's not nice. In the workshop, as you would probably recall, we go around and we all give one word which describes how that feels. Things like unloved, invisible, unheard. That's what people say. And on the other side of the coin, we all know what it feels like to be listened to. We've all had somebody in our lives. I mean, I know with myself, it was my mum. My mum was an amazing listener. I could go to her with anything, literally anything, and she would just listen. No judgment, no solution. She just listened to me. And I felt loved. I felt heard. I felt seen. And we've all had experience of that as well. And so my kind of final parting message is, we know what it feels like to be listened to. How do we want people to feel when they interact with us? Because I know how I want them to feel. I want them to feel loved. I want them to feel heard and seen. I don't want them to feel the other things. And I can do that with anybody. And it's actually a gift to do that with anybody. Anybody we come into contact with, just give them a bit of time. Give them the space to share what they want to share. It's a privilege. It's beautiful. And do you know what? We actually learn some stuff ourselves, because one of the other things that we share in the workshop is that when we're talking, we're not learning. When we're listening, we're learning. I love that.
Love that too. And that's a beautiful way to end our conversation today, Barry. Hopefully there's going to be another one down the line to support the listeners. If people want to find out more about you and your work, how do they do that, Barry?
Okay, so you can either contact me through my company, which is knowledgeisking.co.uk, or one word, knowledge is king, King, or my listening workshop email. In my industry, I'm known as Barry the Book, because I've sold so many books, millions of books over the years. So that email is barrythebook2525@gmail.com. And anybody interested in just finding anything out, or if I can support anybody in any way around listening, then, please don't hesitate to reach out. It's my pleasure to share this. It really is a privilege.
Yeah, I mean, you are joyful in your work, Barry. You are deeply connected to every person in the room, and you share some beautiful stories as well as the wisdom and processes to how to become a deeper listener. Thanks for coming on this morning. It's been wonderful to speak with you and learn more about you. I encourage you, listeners, to practice deep listening. Remember, take a breath. If you find yourself wandering around in the past or future, take a breath and come into the present moment. Get curious about this beautiful human being that's in front of you. Leave your judgment out of the room and give space for that other person to do their own thinking and feeling and experiencing of themselves. Hopefully you've enjoyed. If you have, please share, please comment, please like. If you want more of the same, tell us. If you want different conversations, if you've got ideas for topics, please let us know. We too are always listening. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks for listening. You can find out more about us on our website, www.empower-world.com, and on our social media networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Be empowered.